Welcome back to the Riverport Business Podcast, the show where we sit down with people shaping business, creativity and innovation across St Ives and beyond. Today's episode is all about something that a lot of small business owners quietly worry about. That moment when a one-person business starts to grow and you realise you might need to bring someone else on board. Joining me today is Caroline White from the HR department, who works with small and growing businesses across Cambridgeshire. And we talk about when you should start thinking about HR, what catches people out with their first hire, and at what point it actually makes sense to bring in HR support without killing your culture or overcomplicating things. For anybody who has a small business but hasn't thought about HR, how can your company and services help them?
Firstly, thank you for inviting me along. So the HR department, that's what we do. We help prevent people problems. So when somebody first starts up a company, they are normally passionate about their company and they know everything that they need to know in order to start up their company. What they probably don't know is anything about HR, because unless it's an HR company, why would they? So that's where we come into it. So somebody who starts expanding a little and maybe taking on their first employee will need a contract for them, and they will need to start thinking about policies and procedures. And then they can get in touch with us and we can help them at the very, very beginning. We've got something called like a startup package where we will look at contracts for them, any policies and procedures they need just to help them start up. And sort of like an admin pack, so they've got forms and different bits and pieces that they need to help set up their business. So whether they've already got a few employees or they've got none and they're just about to embark on their first sort of recruit, then we can help from the very beginning.
What size of business do you deal with normally?
So we do have startup businesses, so very, very small, when people take on their first employee. So we have 2, and we have up to maybe 200. So it really, really varies. It varies the number of people and it varies across sections of industry as well. So all sorts. I would imagine that the most popular would be between maybe 20 and 40.
Okay.
But you know, all sorts really.
So if a new company's starting out and they're thinking it's just me, my laptop, me, my van, whatever it is, should they be thinking about HR services then or when they take on their first employee?
Well, I would imagine that if there's just them, then they probably wouldn't need to. I mean, we do things like director service agreements, and if they were the director of the company, then they may need one. But it's when they first start employing people is when they really need some support. Because even if it's just one person, that one person still needs a contract. They need to make sure that that they are complying with all legislation. And they need to cover themselves against any eventuality. So right from the very beginning, it's very, very good to have everything kind of in place, and then they can move forward from them and know that they've got a very good sort of starting block.
So is there a typical pattern? Do people come to you after they've done their first hire or when they've got a few staff on board, or does it vary?
It's a mix. I would say that most people come to us because something's happened and they have a problem.
That was going to be my next question, actually.
So, yeah, some people are very organised and think, OK, we've started to employ people, and we've got a flying start package I mentioned to help people sort of get everything in place. Some people have gone through that and they've got a few employees and then suddenly something goes wrong. And you see it quite often with, there's a small group of people, they know each other well and everybody gets on. And then as they grow a little bit bigger, they start having other people come in. And it only takes one person to kind of set those sort of ripples across. And that's quite often when we get called in.
So what do you think the most common misconception is about people taking on their first employee, and what do they underestimate what they have to do as having that first employee?
I think everybody knows it's expensive.
It's a big step taking on your first employee.
It is a very big step. And, they may have done the kind of the financial aspect of it, working out if they can afford it and profit and things like that. But they also need to think about, they've got a duty of care to that person. So they need to make sure that they've got policies and procedures in place. And, to have an employment contract is a day one right. So they need to make sure that they've got a contract in place. Because everything's fine as long as things are going along swimmingly. It's when something goes wrong that you have to fall back on those kind of things like the contract and the policies. So they need to be in place from the very beginning. And I think some people don't realise that. And when you start up on your journey, you don't really know what you don't know. And you don't really know what questions to ask because you don't know so it's very difficult. So to sort of get that advice from the very beginning, I would like to think it's quite reassuring for people.
And as you said, one of those things I was expecting to ask you just now is, I'm sure you get contacted by people who've got a number of employees, they got their payroll in place and things like that, and then something goes wrong that they need to deal with. They don't understand necessarily what the rules and regulations are about employing somebody or letting somebody go or dealing with some employee dispute. Is that typical of what happens in those situations where people have a problem?
Yes, I think so. I think for smaller businesses, quite often businesses get larger, and for some reason the HR hat is given to the office manager or maybe somebody in finance that don't know. They may be able to sort of look online or something and have a stab at it. But I think there's so much legislation now, and employees are so litigious. They can Google and they can look at online and use AI and come up with all these different things, and it's scary. So when something like that happens, it can be really scary. And depending on how long they've been with the company and what potential claim that they could bring, it could cost the company huge amounts of money. So yes, I think it's a good idea to get in touch with us at that point. Obviously, for our clients who subscribe to our advice line, we say to them, any hint of anything, then contact us immediately because we can help them nip it in the bud. But for new clients who will find themselves with a problem, then we obviously have to sort of step back, try to unpick it. And then it's more difficult, obviously. But then we kind of work with within the parameters of the law to get to an area that they want to be, to try to sort of resolve the situation. But yeah, that is common for people to get them into a bit of a pickle.
And I guess the difficulty is that when something does go wrong, people start using ChatGPT, searching Google, whatever it is. The difficulty, I'm guessing, is that they don't know what the source of truth is on all the information they're getting from online. Whereas if they're using a service like yours, you're keeping up to date with what is the correct thing to do, what the legislation is, and so on.
Absolutely. And so, yes, they can use AI or whatever, and so can the employee. And so they could both be sort of saying, well, what about this law and what about this law? Then it doesn't even make sense and is not even relevant. But also, I guess that our USP is that we provide a very friendly and personable service. So we get to know our clients quite well. So it's not a generic response we'll give. We'll talk to them about it and then provide quite workable solutions for people, and not just kind of some text that may or may not make sense and be up to date.
And what do you think is most businesses commonly get wrong for their first hire?
I think the contract, because everything starts from the contract. Even if somebody's been with you for years and years and they're leaving and you say, well, they went on a training program, I need to recoup the money, or I don't know if they've taken too many holiday days or anything like that. It's back to the contract. So what does the contract say? So the contract is the most important thing because it's the starting point. Things change over the course of somebody's employment and you add on to that, but the contract forms the starting point. So having that at the very beginning, I think is very, very important. And having kind of some guidelines as well. Some companies may think, well, we let people come in between 9 and 10, or we're flexi, and which works fine. And then they get a few more people and people start maybe coming in at 10:10, things like that. And you have to kind of suck it back in. To have those kind of guidelines at the very beginning, it's easier for people to understand what's expected of them.
And I guess that's one of the typical things that would happen as a business grows, as they get more hires. And is that one of the things that can sort of go awry as a business grows and they get more employees and there's less sort of like the personal touch between, or the personal relationship between somebody who's started their company and they know one or two people, to the point where they don't know everybody in the same way that they knew their first hires. I'm guessing that sort of thing is their growing pains, essentially.
Absolutely. The larger your workforce, the more chance there is of sort of people problems, whether it's clashes or, role responsibilities and all those kind of things. So yeah, absolutely, as it grows. And also for somebody who may have started their business and, as you say, they start growing and they've got other things that they need to look at. They need to put maybe some management in place. That kind of transition from very small to medium, they're kind of quite big steps. So we can help with that as well. I think also some people will look around and think, oh, that person's been with us the longest, or they're really good at doing their job. Let's make them manage the team. And they may be really good at doing their job, but managing people is a completely different skill set. So they may not be great at managing. So, and that kind of feeds down throughout. So I think we need to make sure that people have been trained when they put in those positions so that they can be supportive of the team that they've been given.
And I think that it's very common when you're as a founder of a company, and then you start taking on people and the company grows. As I was saying before, the growing pains are there. You're stopping doing what you were good at doing. You're now managing people. And I'm guessing having a service like you to lean on and give advice helps them learn how to manage people.
Yes, absolutely. So we have clients who will call us if there's something going on, maybe every day or once a week, some clients do. And we'll often say, well, what do you want to do? Let's talk about how you're going to achieve that and get there and work with them. So as well as being, giving them advice, hopefully what we're doing in a way is kind of mentoring them a little bit as well, because they'll learn as we go through. And for us, we do it every day. So our advice is up to date and it is relevant. We work with companies, as I said at the very beginning, very small companies and larger companies who have their HR departments. And even within the HR teams, we will talk to the HR people because they don't deal with everything all day, and it's nice to chat things through. So I think all aspects, whether it's managers, owners, HR people, it's really reassuring to have us at the other end of the phone that we can talk through issues with them.
So if somebody's starting out now and they've got a small company with maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 employees, this year, what should they be thinking about doing? Obviously contacting you, but is there any other things that they should be getting in place?
I think they need to make sure that they've got, as I said, they've got the contracts and any policies in place already. They need to start thinking about April, when there will be changes in the minimum wage. in changes in SSP, whether the Employment Rights Act is going to affect them if they've got people on 0 hours. So there's lots going on at the moment that they'll need to be thinking about. And to be kind of prepared in advance will mean that they're sort of one step ahead of the game.
Caroline, thanks very much for coming. It's been fascinating. I'm sure for a lot of small companies who are thinking about hiring, what you're saying will really resonate. And using a company like you has got to be a good way of supporting how they do that in the right way.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Big thank you to Caroline for such a down-to-earth and really practical conversation. And if you're running a one-person business or you're thinking about taking on your first employee, I hope this episode's given you a bit more clarity and maybe a bit more confidence too. You'll find links to Caroline and the HR department in the description below if you want to learn more or maybe just start a conversation. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-world business stories right here on the Riverport Business Podcast.